We're in the book of Exodus in the Sedra of Mishpatim, and the text there gives a number of examples of types of civil damages. We've been focused so far on the ox, and we've looked at all kinds of damage that comes from the ox. The ox is the classic moving, dangerous object that requires responsibility to guard it. And in this fifth chapter of the Mishnah, we're going to move actually to the pit, which is a fixed object, still a dangerous object, but it's, if you like, it's a fixed dangerous object rather than a moving dangerous object. On our way to the pit, however, we're going to look at one more example, which is neither the ox nor the pit, but it's in the same parsha, it's in the same section of Mishpatim, of Exodus, and it deals with someone who crashes into a pregnant woman and she miscarries. Now, there's a tension in the halakha as to what are the rights of the fetus? Maybe she's a part of her mother. Maybe the fetus, that is a part of her mother, his mother, its mother. Maybe the fetus has got independent life to a certain extent. We break Shabbat to save the life of a fetus. Or maybe the father has rights. And the source for the father having rights is here in Mishpatim. So let's just review the verse in Mishpatim, in Exodus, and then we'll see how the Mishnah gently leads us from the ox to the miscarriage. And the verse says, two people are fighting, and they bang, they hurt, they strike a woman who's pregnant, and she miscarries. Veloye ason, and there isn't a disaster. So it's as if there's no fatal injury to the mother in this case. At least that's how we normally translate it. And then the text goes on to say, so he shall be punished according to whatever punishment the woman's husband lays upon him, and he's going to pay in the courts. So creating a miscarriage seems to be something where there's a civil damages are paid in the court, and the damages are paid to the husband, Ba'al Ha'isha. So let's just hold that in mind now, and let's just go back to the Mishnah. We're in the fifth chapter, in the fourth Mishnah. And interestingly, it's not going to begin with the pregnant woman, it's going to start with the ox. Sure, shehayami kaven lachavero v'hika et ha'isha v'yatsu yeladeha patur midmei v'ladot. If an ox aimed at its neighbor but it missed somehow, maybe it's trying to gore another ox. The language is chavero, its neighbor, its friend, its fellow. The ox seems to be trying to go for another ox, and it misses. V'hika ha'isha, and it strikes a woman. V'yatsu yeladeha, and she miscarries. Patur midmei v'ladot. He's not liable for the value of the offspring. He, of course, being the owner of the ox person is not going to be liable. But there's always a but. Adam shehayamit kaven lachavero. If a person aimed at its fellow. Interesting. I mean, I think the word Adam is gender neutral here, and we've always said that the Torah of damages is gender neutral. Adam shehayami kaven lachavero, so a person aimed at their fellow, same text, vehikaita isha v'yatsu yeladeha, but they strike a woman and she miscarries. Mishalem demei v'ladut, he pays the value of the offspring. So we have civil damages. Heitzad mishalem demei v'ladut. How does he pay the damages? Well, shamim et ha'isha, they value the woman. I'm with apologies for this language, but I suppose we're talking about assessment of damages. So they value the woman. They assess the value of the woman before she gave birth and the value after she gave birth. And the presumption is somehow that the value after she gave birth is more. Or I presume it's not quite clear how this works from the Mishnah. By the way, the presumption in the Bartanura is that she is worth more after she gives birth, because a woman about to give birth has a very strong probability of not surviving the process. I mean, in medieval England, a woman would make a will before going into labor. It's the most dangerous thing that someone might do. So that's the presumption the Bartanura makes. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is going to disagree straight away. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, imken misha ha isha yoledet he mashbachat. If so, once a woman gives birth, she's more valuable. I think must be the comment that the Bartanura is reflecting. She's more valuable because she survived. Ella, but that's not how we do things. Ella, shamim et avladut kama hen yafim. Actually, we assess the offspring. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says very clearly we assess the value of the offspring. And halakha doesn't seem to go like him. So I'm not sure how this would work in practice. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says we assess the offspring. V'notnin labal, and we give the money to the husband. V'im ein labal, if the husband isn't alive, or if she doesn't have a husband, notnin la yorshav, they give it to his heirs. And then the Mishnah concludes, Haita shifcha v'nishacha, if she was a freed bondwoman, or gioret, patur. There seems, if she was a freed slave woman or a proselyte, there's no penalty. And it seems to be that the husband doesn't have a connection to the children. If she's a freed bondwoman or a proselyte, perhaps she converted after she got pregnant, or perhaps he's died. Maybe this refers to a husband who's died, and maybe he's a convert and he doesn't have heirs. It's not clear. It's not clear. But anyway, this is how we are finishing the Torah of the ox. And then the Mishnah moves to the Torah of the pit. Now, again, we're going to go back to the verses. We're back in Mishpatim, the same source. If a person opens a pit or digs a pit, he doesn't cover it. So just as with the ox, there's a responsibility on someone who creates a dangerous object to take care of it. He's got to cover it up. Just like he has to guard the ox, he has to cover the pit. And an ox or an ass falls into it. The owner of the pit is going to pay. They're going to pay silver to the owner, and the dead animal is going to be his. So it sounds from the verse as if this ox or ass that's falling into a pit is going to die in the pit. It seems like we've got a fatal injury to an animal here. And the Mishnah is going to explore around this subject in a slightly different text, actually, from the one that we have in the printed edition. So someone digs a pit in the public domain, and an ox or an ass falls into it, and he's liable. We're not surprised there. But let's keep on learning. It doesn't matter what kind of pit it is. It could be a pit, a trench, a cavern, could be a ditch or a channel, whatever kind of excavation he makes in the ground, he's liable. So there's a generalized responsibility on people undertaking public works. If they excavate, they're liable. If so, why does it say a pit? The language of the Torah is very specific. Why does it say a pit? If It says a pit because we know that a pit is deep enough to cause death if it's 10 handbreadths deep. That's 10 tefachim. That's about a yard deep. We know that a pit, which is a yard deep, is deep enough to be dangerous, to be life-threatening. And so we learn that anything dug out which is deep enough, which is a yard deep, which is 10 amot deep, 10 hands breadths, that the same halacha applies. 10 hands breadths is a critical depth. Maybe it was less than 10 hands breadths deep, 10 tefachim. And an ox or an axe fell in and died. So the same thing happens, but it's not deep enough. Patur. The owner's not liable. This verse assigning liability to the owner for a dead ox or ass only seems to apply if the pit is 10 hands breadths deep. But of course, regular damages still apply. The im huzakbo chayav. If it was just damaged, if someone trips over, or if the ox falls over and damages its leg falling into the pit, he's still liable. And he's liable wherever this is dug. Maybe a person dug a pit in a private space and opened it up into public space. Maybe he dug it in the public space and he opened it up into a different public space. Hayav, he's still liable. The only place he isn't liable is if he digs it in his own private space, his closed private space. And as we've already seen, if someone wanders into your closed private space with, their animal or their whatever, they have to take care. The general rule is if they wander into your space, then they have to take care, just as much as if you wander into someone else's space, you have to take care.